Welcome to Volume 3 of Feet to Floor. This is a series of jiu-jitsu instructional videos designed to cover the standing skills of the sport of jiu-jitsu. The intention of Feet to Floor was to work in 3 distinct volumes to cover 10 essential skills of jiu-jitsu in the standing position. Volume 1 was intended to cover the invaluable precursor skills, the first skill that one must study in the standing situation. These are skills such as gripping, stance, motion, off-balancing, etc., without which none of the other skills will be possible. Then, Volume 1 moved on to takedowns from the front. This is the skill that most people associate with the standing position in jiu-jitsu. When most people talk about standing skills, they're talking about takedowns where your opponent is in front of you and you take him down to the floor in a fairly conventional fashion. We also looked at the idea that there are a whole category of takedowns in jiu-jitsu which are absent in other grappling sports such as judo. These are takedowns from the rear. Remember that jiu-jitsu enables you to score with both front and rear takedowns, and if we're going to maximize our performance in the standing position, we must be strong in both. In Volume 2, we looked at front takedowns, which are those which take a little longer to learn, but which greatly increase our performance in the standing position. We put a particular emphasis on the so-called ashiwaza, or takedowns that feature the use of feet and legs, and sutemiwaza, takedowns that feature the use of falling body weight. We identified these sutemiwaza, tomonagi, ukiwaza, and sumigeshi as some of the best adapted takedowns to the sport of jiu-jitsu. One of the main themes of Feet to Floor is that not all takedowns are created equal when it comes to applicability in the sport of jiu-jitsu. As a general rule, the kinds of takedowns that are most appropriate for the sport of jiu-jitsu are rather conservative in nature. Jiu-jitsu, as a general rule, punishes risk in the standing position, as opposed to most grappling styles which rewards risk. Most grappling styles try to encourage the athlete to go for riskier throws with greater amplitude. Jiu-jitsu, on the contrary, encourages athletes to go for the least risky throws with the least amplitude. These exhibit the greatest degree of control and the least chance of your opponent scoring on you as you attempt the takedowns. Now, Volumes 1 and 2 focused primarily on those initial skills of the precursor skills of gaining grips on your opponent, getting position, getting them out of balance, etc., and then takedowns from the front and the rear. You will never develop your standing curriculum in the sport of jiu-jitsu until you go far beyond these initial skills. There are a range of skills in jiu-jitsu in the standing position that go far beyond simple takedowns and into some of the most unique elements in the sport. The whole notion of mat returns becomes very important in the sport of jiu-jitsu. Now, mat returns do feature in some styles of wrestling. Typically, most people understand the conventional sense of mat returns. Mat returns differ from takedowns. Takedowns start with the two athletes in the standing position and take the other fellow down to the floor. In mat returns, you reverse the order. You start down on the floor and your opponent tries to stand up on you and get away, while you try to repetitively return them to the mat. So takedowns start standing and go down to the ground. Mat returns start on the ground, go up to standing, and then return to the ground. In wrestling, mat returns always occur with you behind your opponent. And yes, these certainly do occur in the sport of jiu-jitsu too. So rear mat returns are one of the essential skills of the sport. However, there is a separate category of front mat returns. This is because jiu-jitsu is primarily fought from various forms of guard position. So the athletes will often, in fact, in most cases, be facing each other when the mat returns are put into operation. So we have 2 forms of mat return applicable to the sport of jiu-jitsu: rear mat returns and front mat returns. There are, in addition, one of the most distinctive features in the sport of jiu-jitsu in the standing position are guard pulls. Traditionally, guard pulls are seen as a rather passive way of fighting in the standing situation. The idea is that if we feel our opponent has better standing skills than we do, we want to minimize risk of getting scored upon, and we go out and we simply get the minimum prerequisite of pulling guard, which is to get some form of superficial grip upon your opponent and then drag them down to the ground into a seated or a supine position and pull them into our guard. While there's nothing intrinsically wrong with this, essentially diminishes our ability to score from the standing position. In this video, volume 3 of Feet to Floor, we introduce a new attitude with regards guard pulls. This is the so-called PTS, or pull to sweep approach to guard pulls. Instead of just pulling our opponent down to the ground, we pull them directly into a sweeping position. In this way, we can use guard pulls to score the same number of points, 2, as a takedown. These PTS guard pulls form a very viable alternative to takedowns in the standing position. They score the same, and they're much easier for most jiu-jitsu players to accomplish because most jiu-jitsu players already have a very high degree of skill with regards guard sweeps. If they can simply apply those guard sweeps directly from the standing position, they will have a viable method of scoring on opponents who may have better takedown skills than them. And it will take away that passive negative aspect of guard pulling and make guard pulling part of a proactive, positive attacking game from the standing situation. In addition to the PTS method of pulling guard, there's also PTA, pulling to advantage. It's not always going to be the case that athletes can pull directly to a sweep, but athletes can be trained to pull to some form of advantage, where they get their opponent out of balance and force them into an extended, vulnerable position down on the floor, typically with their hips elevated and their hands on the mat. This will make it very easy to transition quickly into various forms of sweeps and submissions after a guard pull. This forms another means by which guard pulls can be transformed from a passive defensive tactic into a highly aggressive offensive tactic, leading to scores and submissions. In addition to guard pulls, one of the skills that we must develop in the standing position in the sport of jiu-jitsu is counters to a guard pull. For every time that someone attempts to throw us in the standing position in the sport of jiu-jitsu, you'll get more than 10 situations where your opponent goes to pull guard on you. Most people simply accept their opponent pulling guard and then go to work on the floor. There is a great opportunity for us to go immediately into some form of pass as our opponent is pulling guard directly from the standing position. Because your opponent doesn't have full dominant grips upon you, as they go to their guard pull, there's going to be a momentary opportunity for us to gain strong attacking positions and even score right off our opponent's guard pull. So we'll be spending quite a bit of time looking at how to counter a guard pull by an opponent and go immediately into a dominant position down on the floor. In addition to pulling guard, there is a whole category of pulling an opponent directly into a submission hold. This provides another excellent means of scoring not points but submissions directly from the standing position. Most jiu-jitsu athletes are very familiar with arm bars, leg locks, triangle attacks, etc., and often exhibit these skills in a very strong and convincing fashion down on the floor. Many of these submission holds can be applied quite readily and quite easily directly from the standing position. If you come up against someone who has superior throwing skills to yourself, rather than passively pulling guard, you might pull them directly into a submission hold and take a strong thrower completely out of his game plan and into an area where you have a decided technical advantage, namely submission holds. And in this way, a superior thrower could easily be defeated from the standing position. Another fascinating aspect of jiu-jitsu in the standing position is the idea of takedown counters. Jiu-jitsu players often talk about building skills of takedowns. What many of them overlook is that some of the best ways to score in the sport of jiu-jitsu involve countering a takedown. The reasoning is quite simple. Takedowns in the sport of jiu-jitsu only score 2 points. But if you were able to counter your opponent's takedown and expose their back as they go into a failed takedown and a defensive turtle position on the floor, you now have a golden opportunity to get one of the highest point scores in the sport, the rear mounted position. This scores 4 points, double what a takedown would score. If you use takedown counters to expose your opponent's back, you're going to get repeated opportunities in the course of a match to get double the score of a takedown. As such, takedown counters represent one of the great unheralded scoring opportunities in the standing position in the sport of jiu-jitsu. We're hoping to change that in this volume 3 of Feet to Floor. Another standing skill which is overlooked throughout the jiu-jitsu community, but which has immense value in competition, is the skill of takedown recovery. In most grappling sports, if I enter a takedown and fail, the rules of the sport in conjunction with the referee will protect me. So in judo, if I come in for a strong throw attempt, fail, and expose my back to my opponent, I simply hang on in the defensive turtle position for a short period of time. The referee will intervene and we will be restarted on the feet. So too in many forms of wrestling. Time is limited in most grappling sports. If a technique doesn't score rather quickly, the referee will intervene throughout the match and resume the action in neutral standing positions. In jiu-jitsu, there is almost no referee intervention. If you make a mistake with a given takedown, you will have to save yourself from the trouble you've gotten yourself into. As I said before, jiu-jitsu, as a general rule, punishes risk, while most grappling sports reward risk. As a result, athletes must be taught takedown recovery. If you are attempting takedowns and failing and getting scored upon every time you fail, your confidence will drop and very soon you will stop performing takedowns. Once athletes learn that they can recover from a failed takedown, get back to guard position, and then stand back up to a neutral standing situation without getting scored on, they will gain confidence to keep trying takedowns as the fear of getting scored on during a failed takedown diminishes. And so we see there are 10 major standing skills in the sport of jiu-jitsu. The first were the so-called precursor skills: stance, motion, gripping, off-balancing, etc. We looked at the idea of a second skill, front takedowns; a third skill, rear takedowns; a fourth skill, rear mat returns; a fifth skill, front mat returns; a sixth skill, guard pulls, which we divided into pulling directly to sweeps, pulling to advantage, or just pulling to the neutral guard position. There is a seventh skill of guard pull counters. Someone pulls guard on us and we counter with some kind of positional advance. An eighth skill, submission pulls. Instead of pulling to guard position, we pull directly to a standing submission entry. The ninth skill was takedown counters, which represents arguably the greatest point scoring opportunity in the sport. Instead of scoring 2 points for a takedown, we score 4 points for a back take as we counter our opponent's takedown attempt. And a 10th skill, the skill of takedown recovery, so that if we fail with a given takedown, we don't get scored on. These 10 skills represent the complete jiu-jitsu skill set in the standing position. We do ourselves a huge disservice if we simply talk about takedowns as the standing skill. There is so much more to the game than just learning a few takedowns. Only when we go across the board and identify all 10 skills of the standing position will we maximize our performance and create a unique standing skill set for the sport of jiu-jitsu. If we can study and develop a complete curriculum for all 10 of these skills, jiu-jitsu can transform over time in the standing position and develop its own set of skills and its own curriculum appropriate for the rule set of the sport. This is the goal of the complete series of Feet to Floor. In Volume 3, we focus primarily upon the skills of mat returns, both rear and front, guard pulls, especially this new philosophy of pulling guard, pulling directly to a sweep and pulling to advantage, guard pull counters, pulling directly to a submission, takedown counters, and takedown recovery. We'll also spend a small amount of time looking at slightly riskier throws with higher amplitude. We're going to try and mitigate the risk to the greatest degree possible, but also increase the amplitude of the throw so you can throw with authority in a competitive setting. This will round out the Feet to Floor series and create a Volume 3, which hopefully over time will give you a complete set of skills for the standing position appropriate for the sport of jiu-jitsu and help you with both sparring and competition. Now, we're going to look further into this question of entering directly into submission holds from the standing position. These represent some of the most interesting aspects of jiu-jitsu standing skills, where instead of just pulling our opponent into guard position, we're pulling actively into a submissions game. This is an excellent equalizer against people you believe are better in the standing position at throwing than you are. Very often, these techniques can be done from one-handed grips, where it's hard for your opponent to throw you, and you can immediately take them out of a situation where they're comfortable standing throws and put them into a situation where they're down on the floor fighting for survival against your submission holds. So you can fight a takedown specialist with submissions. Okay, you're a submission specialist, a jiu-jitsu guy. You can take someone who's a good wrestler or a good judo player and immediately enter into submission holds from standing and take them out of their element. We've looked at the idea of employing arm bars in this situation. Now let's look at the idea of employing knee bars. Please understand that rolling into the legs can be done in different ways, some of which are legal, some of which are illegal. Obviously, we want to avoid the illegal methods. Some are legal but unsafe. I want to show you methods that you can use in the gym with your friends with an excellent safety record. Okay, here's a great rule of thumb which I'm going to offer you. Whenever you go to employ takedowns and movements into submission holds from the standing position, only employ those methods where your body weight goes to the floor and not to your opponent's legs. Anytime you jump onto your opponent's legs, bad things are guaranteed to happen. You might get away with it once, twice, 3 times, but somewhere along the line, you're going to jump onto your training partner's legs and a catastrophic injury is going to happen. It's only a matter of time. You can be very safe and very effective in the standing position, entering into submission holds, with a simple safety rule. Commit your body weight to the floor, not to your training partner. Let's have a look at this in a practical context. If I want to enter into knee bars in standing position, I'm going to show a bunch of grips to do this. I'll show you one simple grip which works quite well. In the standing situation, I stand Kenkyotsu against my opponent. As we go into grips, I just take a grip here on my training partner's frontal belt. Okay, I'm going to go into a forward roll that commits my body weight to the floor. Because I am committing to the floor, this move is 100% safe because my falling body weight doesn't go onto him, it goes onto the mat. So as I step in front of my training partner, we come through and lock directly into this position here. Okay, at no point did my body weight go crashing into my training partner's legs or hips. Everything went down into the floor. So looking at it again, regardless of the grips used, I'll demonstrate out of one simple form of grip, a front belt grip. As I go in on my training partner, I step, I make a second step, and my upper body goes to the floor. And as a result, it's 100% safe. Now, this stands in contrast with a flying knee bar, where I fly onto my opponent's legs. This would be an example of an unsafe entry into the legs. It's effective, it works, but there's a danger of catastrophic injury when you do this with your friends. In a flying knee bar injury, my body weight doesn't go to the floor, it goes to my training partner's leg. So if we grip up with a training partner like so, I'm going to go in on my training partner and commit straight into the leg. Okay, it looks nice. It is definitely effective, but you can see what the problem is here. You're landing with 100% of your body weight onto one of your opponent's legs. If Giancarlo knows what's happening and is stationary and braced, it's okay. We can demonstrate it safely all day. But in competition, where you're moving, there's slippery mats, you jump and he's in one position, but by the time you land, he's in another position. You can see it's very easy to crash into your training partner's knee with 100% of your body weight in ways that just do terrible damage. Okay, so if you're jumping directly onto your opponent's legs, you are taking a big risk with your training partner's health. okay? I urge you not to use these methods in training. Once again, in a flying knee bar, I fly onto my training partner's leg, okay? So I come in and I literally land on my training partner's hip. From here, I pull him forward into the lock, okay? It's a lovely method in demonstration. But in the gym, you got a crowded gym with people running around, things get competitive. A guy's in a given location, you jump to that location, he moves, it's a dynamic flowing situation, and I've seen disasters happen with this, okay, where you'll get a guy who's 220 pounds jumping onto a 170 pounder's leg, and it's just a horrendous snap. It's a freaking disaster. Please obey the most important safety rule of the standing position. Don't jump your body weight into your opponent's lower body. I don't like to see flying guard pulls, flying arm bars, sometimes yes, sometimes no, depending on the skill level. Flying knee bars, I've seen a lot of people wreck with this, okay? Don't confuse a flying knee bar with a very different technique, the Kani Basami, or flying scissor. In a flying scissor, I take my opponent in a backwards direction. In a flying knee bar, I take him forwards. So, flying knee bar, I roll forwards on my opponent. I lock up, and from here, we go forwards, okay? Kani Basami is a very different kettle of fish. Here, I hook and scissor my opponent's legs with the intention of taking them backwards, okay? So as we tie up with a training partner, in Kani Basami, I figure my legs go right on him, and we tilt the man over in this direction, okay? Kani Basami is illegal in jiu-jitsu competition. If you pull that move, you will immediately be disqualified and taken out of competition. You cannot use this. In addition, I urge you not to use this technique in the gym with your friends. I have seen a large number of people over the last 30 years of my life get badly injured with this move. Okay, I've seen broken ankles broken so badly that it made the worst heel hook look like nothing in comparison. I've seen knees completely destroyed. Again, worse than any heel hook could ever do. I've seen hips break. That's how bad this can get. I've seen hips dislocated. It's hard to dislocate a human hip. It's difficult to do. And I've seen it done on multiple occasions with this method. I'm going to give you a piece of simple advice. Kani Basami is a wonderful move. It's highly effective, and you probably know my students are famous for it. When you see my students compete, you will often see them employ Kani Basami. You will never see them do it in the gym. My students are not allowed to use Kani Basami in the gym with each other. No exceptions. Not even the best guys. Not even Gary Tonin, Gordon Ryan. None of them are allowed to do it. Because the accident rate associated with it is so high. Let me understand this. So let me make you understand this. People see my students employ Kani Basami and they're like, wow, that looks amazing, and they finish fights with it, so I should be doing it too. In competition, I have my students use Kani Basami because in some forms of competition, not classical jiu-jitsu, but in some tournaments we enter, Kani Basami is legal and it works damn well. It's a good move. Okay, it was actually one of my personal favorite moves. Whenever Renzo would have me go against tough competitive wrestlers, I would give them a single leg, I would throw Kani Basami and heel. So that was my go-to move against people who were better in the standing position than I was. I did it for years. But when it's time to use it in the gym, anytime there's a size difference, it's a big issue. You get a 220-pound guy doing Kani Basami on a 170-pounder, that's a recipe for disaster. Believe it or not, there doesn't even have to be a size difference. I've seen on 2 occasions women break men's knees with Kani Basami, even though the woman was significantly lighter than the man was. Okay, it doesn't take a lot jumping on the side of someone's knee to do terrible damage. When people see Kani Basami, they're like, well, it looks safe to me. You just demonstrated it, okay? Like Giancarlo is here with me. It looks perfectly safe, right? I get a grip on Giancarlo. He gets a grip on me, and we jump in, and it just looks, well, that didn't look too bad. What could go wrong with that, okay? That's because Giancarlo is stationary, and his body is braced. What if we're moving, and he's in a given location, and I jump to what I think is that location, but he's moving, so by the time I arrive on his leg, he's in a new location. And that location might be his kneecap, or his hip, or his ankle. You're not going to injure someone every time you do this. You might get away with it 6, 7, 8, 9 times. And then there's that 10th time where your buddy gets carted off to the hospital and he's out of jiu-jitsu for a year, 2 years, maybe never even come back. I don't allow this in the gym for a reason, because I've seen so many people get wrecked by its application in the gym. We use it where it's allowed in competition. We drill it on each other. We never use it on each other in the gym. Okay, I'm going to urge you to do the same. Avoid leg lock entries in the standing position where your body weight goes onto your opponent's legs. Use the rolling versions of knee bars where your body goes into the floor. These are legal, they are highly effective, and they are very, very safe. Anytime you're throwing body weight onto your friend's legs, they won't be your friends for very long. Let me assure you of that. Okay, so with that in mind, as a safety rule, now let's start to go into safe, effective versions of standing entries into knee bars. Now it's time for us to start going into the rolling knee bar, the safe versions where we commit our body weight to the floor. Let's look what is probably the easiest grip for most people to employ when you start going into rolling knee bars from standing position. It's a safe method. It's very effective. It's quite a strong method. It does suffer from the problem of predictability. Once you get this grip, it's kind of transparent what you're about to do, and that's the disadvantage of it, but it's a good place to start your journey. A front belt grip involves a situation, typically Kenkiotsu situation like that, okay? As we come out and hand fight with each other, there's going to be opportunities for us to go through and secure a front belt grip right there in front of my training partner, okay? Now that's a weird looking grip, you don't see it very often. When my opponent goes to yank away from me, he finds to his horror that that's a grip that controls the hips. It's a very, very strong grip. Okay. Now there's not a lot of throws you can do off this grip, but there's a damn good rolling knee bar. Okay. When my opponent's in stance, we're going to go in and we're going to take a foot inside our training partner's legs. Okay. Now you guys might be familiar with one of the most famous throws in the standing position, Uchimata. Okay. And in Uchimata, the idea is that I step my foot inside my training partner's legs, and my second foot steps inside like so, and we come into an inner thigh throw that knocks our opponent down to the mat. The idea behind Uchimata is I penetrate and I bring my foot between my training partner's legs. Okay? And as a result, we can come in and hit a beautiful forward throw. The idea behind Uchimata is from here, I step between my training partner's legs. And as a result, from here, we can go into a very strong forward throw. Okay? People often confuse the rolling knee bar with Uchimata. In Uchimata, I step my leg between his legs, okay? And my head goes in this direction here, okay? In a good Uchimata, I want my head to go in a curve so that I face outwards. So my feet go inwards and my head goes outwards. And if I can do this, you can throw a lot of people, okay? Once you get into a strong Uchimata, you'll understand that the knee bar is almost the exact opposite. It looks superficially similar because you have the inner thigh connection, but it's a very different action, okay? When we grip up with each other, in a knee bar entry, I go outside with my foot. We don't go inside like Uchimata, we go outside. And instead of my head going out here somewhere, it goes in and across, okay? So when we start off, standing position, we go through, we get our initial grip, and I step in here. Then I step back, and we're ready to go, okay? Once we get into this motion, we're right there, and we control our training partner's hips, and we're ready to play, okay? Now let's do a little experiment here. Giancarlo is going to hold his base and posture. And you're going to see that that grip on the hip is damn strong. It's literally, the belt is connected to your opponent's center of gravity. So when you get this grip, he can resist to a certain level, and then falls. So we start off, Kenkiotsu situation. From here, we go through and fix up our initial grip. Okay, strong body. When I go in on my training partner, I step in 1, I step in 2, and you see, you get to a situation where it's very, very hard for him to prevent the forward motion. Don't go over. I use my leg and his hip to force him down to the floor, and we end up in perfect attacking position. Okay, it's such a strong connection to your opponent's center of gravity that you can really take over even a strongly resistant opponent. I said earlier that the primary defect of this grip is that it's kind of predictable. There's so few takedowns that come off this grip that it's kind of transparent what your intention is, especially if you've hit it successfully a few times in competition. Nonetheless, the grip itself is so strong that even if your opponent knows what's going on, it's pretty hard for him to stop you. Okay? So as we come out, look how I go in on my training partner and I fix up that initial grip. Okay? Now it's that first step inside his legs. Then the big step around that puts me in a position to go on the attack. Okay? Now, a word to the wise. If the primary problem here is predictability, you might be asking, how the hell are you going to get that grip on someone who doesn't want you to get that grip? If everyone knows what your intention is, they're going to defend the belt, right? Okay. You've got an opponent here. If he doesn't want me grabbing his belt, he's going to use his hands to make it damn difficult. Okay, so what are we going to do? Well, one of my favorite grips is hands down. I'll let a guy get a grip on me, just like so. I'll take the hands down position like so. When my hand forces his hand down, and I fix up my grips like this. As we maneuver around the mat, he tries to get his hand on me. He can't. You've got the hands down position. Okay. From hands down, I release and put my second hand right in there. So it's a very short journey from hands down to front belt. Now I just snap his grip off. You've left with front belt. That's all we need. Okay. Right from here, you probably guessed it. We step around the corner, and we're right away into a winning position. Okay. So that's how I usually set it up, with the hands down position. We stand Kenkiotsu, and like so. He comes out, goes in for his grip, we snap it off. As I go in with my training partner, he's thinking, oh, he's working with a given throwing grip here. And then right off the throwing grip, my hand goes in. Okay? That's when we just step, roll, and we're in business, ready to attack. Okay? A very practical way to get into that powerful front belt grip and start taking people down. We just said that the primary defect of the front belt grip is that it's pretty predictable. Okay, once you get the front of the belt, there's not a lot of throws you can do from that position. If you get a reputation as someone who's a rolling knee bar guy, every time people see you grabbing the front belt, they're going to go, that's what he wants, rolling knee bar, and they'll defend themselves accordingly. A way to get around this is to substitute a grip which isn't as strong. It doesn't give you the same direct control of the hips, but it doesn't convey what your intention is. And this is a simple lapel grip from Kenkiotsu. Okay? So we have an opponent standing. He's standing righty. I stand left against him. So we're opposite stance. Okay? As we play in front of our training partner, we go through and we take a nice lapel grip up here by the collarbone. Okay? From the lapel grip, we step 1 foot inside, and you guessed it, the second foot steps outside. We're not throwing a uchimata here. So our foot goes on the outside. Okay? I turn my hand. So I go from thumb up to thumb down. That's a key detail because it's going to be a high elbow pull that brings him in. Okay. Now let's say he has a strong resistant body and knows that I'm a knee bar specialist and it doesn't want to go down. We step in 1, then we take the big back step and we go into the move. Watch my right foot step up and we go in here. His hands commit to the mat. My second hand goes across and we go into double trouble. Both legs connected. Now, he can try whatever he wants to base out. His base is in the direction of his hands and head. But I don't push to his base, I push across where there is no base. And as a result, he ends up in the perfect knee bar position, ready to be attacked. Okay? So once again, What I don't want to do, just look at the tripod position, buddy. Let's understand something about the tripod. The direction that his fingers are pointing is his base of support. If I try to push that way, he feels as strong as an ox. But if I pull in the direction where there's no base, he falls pretty easily. Okay? That's the idea that we're working with here. Don't push into his base of support, push away from it. So from Kenkyotsu situation, we come through, we get an initial grip on our training partner, my hand turns, and we step in on a training partner, my leg makes an initial Uchimata-like contact, and my second leg hops all the way up. As I feel the resistance, look how I catch, and then I bring my feet up high to the ceiling, strong body Giancarlo, and I push across his hips. So that he comes down into a situation where we have the legs well controlled and we're ready to attack with that knee bar down on the floor. Okay? Let's come a little bit closer to the camera so you can see some details here. Okay. First, this move has to be done Kenkyotsu, or opposite stance. So he stands right, I stand left. When I go through and get my grip, I start thumb up. But as I enter the move, I go thumb down so that I get a high elbow that pulls him forward and brings the head forward into the throat. Secondly, foot position. One goes inside, one goes outside. And I want to hook high up in the thigh. Then I commit to the floor and we go down into the move. Okay? So, with that in mind, we come out towards our training partner and we play. From the play situation, look how I go in. I turn my thumb, and now we're ready to enter. We go straight into position like so. Catch the second leg. Feet come up, tilt them down, and there's the winning position that we're looking for. Okay? So that's a simple and practical way to go from a grip that doesn't really convey what your intention is into the knee bar. Now let's look at the advantage of this. Because you're gripping the lapel, it's pretty unclear what you want to do as far as your intentions go. There's a lot of things you can do off a lapel. Okay? Kenkyotsu situation with lapel. My opponent comes out, we lock in, he gets his grip. From here, there's a dozen things I could be doing in this position. Okay? It's not unheard of in situations like this to go into Kataguruma. It's not unheard of in these situations to come in and attack with knee picks. It's not unheard of in these situations to draw our training partner through and come down into ankle picks. Okay? There's many things I can do from here. I can hit a simple Sasai where I go around the corner and put my man down. There's no telling what you're going to do off a grip like this. So when we work in this position, he's thinking like, what the hell's coming next? There's no forewarning that it's going to be a rolling knee bar. Here, I can't hit a Sasai off this. Can't hit knee picks, ankle picks. There's only one thing that really comes off this. Well, there's a few others, but there's one main thing that comes off this, especially if you have a reputation as a leg lock guy. Okay? But here, man, anything could happen. Okay? I come in on my training partner. We find ourselves in situations where there's all manner of attacks. Okay? So there's very little to warn our opponent. And as we play in this position, it's not so difficult for us to work our power hand nice and high, and then in one motion, we go straight on in. Lock, bring him down to the floor, and we're ready to play. So this is an excellent method of gripping to enter into the rolling knee bar. Now, we're looking at different grip strategies to go into the rolling knee bar. We just saw the advantage of a lapel grip is that it gives no real warning as to what my intention are. There's many kinds of attack I can use on this. Similar thing when we go scapular gripping. If we come up close to the camera, the idea behind a scapular grip is like all rolling knee bars, it's done from Kenkyotsu. We come out hand fighting. We're going to fire over the training partner's body and get a good grip here at the scapula. The idea is we want to fold a flap of cloth that gives an excellent handle to our training partner's body. He's probably going to get a grip on you, and you'll be working here from a Kenkyotsu situation, one-handed, like so. Okay, so this will be the general situation that we work with. This scapular grip gives excellent control of your opponent's head. When he tries to pull away, it's a tough thing to do. And it's going to make it relatively simple for us to go into our training partner's leg and go to work. Okay, so the scapular grip too conveys very little about what your intention is. There's many things you can do off a scapular grip. Okay, so we're here in front of our training partner. As we come in, we fire the grip over the top and we get to our training partner's scapula. From head to head situation, look how I just go in on my training partner, I fire my leg up the middle and I just step. And as a result, we pull all the way up, we go to the second leg, lock, and once again, we find ourselves in a classic knee bar situation. Okay, so once again, scapular gripping for a rolling knee bar. We come out Kenkyotsu, opposite stance. Okay, as we come in towards our training partner, we lock up and we get our second hand on. If he grips me, we want to use gripping patterns where we essentially go one-handed with each other like so. So I pull my man around. Look out, from here I just bring my leg inside his leg. And as a result, we go straight on through. If he goes straight on through, congratulations, you're right into the move. If he bases out with his hands, we go double trouble. Okay, so we come out towards our training partner, we go through and lock up. Move the man around. From here, we just go straight on in, catch. We lock up, hips go high, double trouble, and finishing position. The beauty is the scapular grip conveys nothing about what your intention is. So when we go in on a training partner, we could be doing anything from here. Okay? You could go running across your training partner and attack with Sasai. You could go in on a training partner and attack right away with a knee pick and put him down to the mat. There's no telling what your intention is. Okay? So that knee bar will be well disguised. Now, let's look at another excellent grip to go into rolling knee bars. The idea, of course, is we want to employ entries into the legs, the knee bar in particular, which are legal and safe. That means rolling forward with our body weight committing to the mat, never to our opponent's body. We never jump our body weight onto a training partner. Anytime you go to jump your body weight onto a training partner, you are taking terrible risks with your training partner's health. And that guy that was your best friend on the mat may be the guy that you send to the hospital. No one wants that on their conscience. No one wants to be the member of a team who's wrecked 2 or 3 members of the team in a terrible, catastrophic way. We all love jiu-jitsu, but none of us wants to be the guy that gets carted off in an ambulance and is wondering how you're even going to make a living for the next 12 months as you're coming out of surgery. Always, we want to respect our training partners by applying good but safe technique. Now, the rolling knee bar can be a very safe method provided we commit our body weight to the mat and never our opponent's body. Never do we jump onto our opponent's legs. It's just asking for trouble. Like, as I said before, you can get away with it once, twice, 3 times. So you're playing Russian roulette. You're going to end up in a situation where at some point you're going to land on the poor guy's leg in a way where he's not walking away. So one very safe and very effective method of entry into the legs using the rolling method where we commit our body weight to the mat is the arm trap. Now, the arm trap is a big part of our standing curriculum. We use it for sumigeshi, ukiwaza, many other forms of takedown. Okay, and it's also a great way to enter into the legs and get some knee bar action on. So, again, as I'm sure you've guessed by this point, it's a Kenkyotsu situation. He's got righty, I'm lefty, we're staying opposite stance. From here, as he comes out to make grips, we intercept, we bring the arm on by, and we fire our hand over the top. Turn. So we have the arm trap, where my grip goes here to my training partner's lat muscle. So you have his arm in like so. Now, from this position, we normally go into things like sumigeshi, ukiwaza, etc. Okay? But if I feel I've become predictable with my sumigeshi, and it's time to do some alternative attacks, this is a great example of how we can do this. We're going to bring our leg here between our training partner's legs, and as you guessed, my foot steps to the outside, make your body strong, and we just hang off our training partner's body. And as a result, we end up in the perfect position to attack and finish. Okay? This is an excellent way to take an opponent down with control, down into the knee bar. So we start off, we go through, and we get our favorite grip, just like so. Now, I step in 1, okay? I step back 2, and we get an excellent grip that controls our man. When he tries to twist away from here, it's a very difficult thing, and you're in the perfect position to go through and finish with the knee bar. This too is a very realistic method. One of the advantages of this method is that many of your opponents will be expecting conventional attacks like a sumigeshi, even an uchimata from this position. And they're not expecting the knee bar, the rolling knee bar. So you'll often have people expecting a certain kind of attack. You surprise them with this, you'll get into the legs and get your standing entry to a good submission hold. Now, let's have a look at one of the most common actions in all of jiu-jitsu in the standing position. In fact, I think it's fair to say it probably is the most common action. This is the action of coming out at the start of a match or at any period during a match where the two athletes are standing and one of the athletes decides to pull guard. Now, this is one of the most unique aspects to the sport of jiu-jitsu. In most grappling sports, you simply don't have the option of going out and sitting down to the ground in front of your opponent. You're expected to compete for a takedown before you go down to the ground. Most grappling styles are standing dominant. There's a sense in which if the action goes down to the ground and there's some period of inactivity, the athletes are returned to the standing position. So the standing position takes precedence. Jiu-jitsu styles of competition are unique insofar as the ground takes the majority of the action. And so if one of the athletes sits down, I cannot just pull away from them and demand that he come up to the standing position again. In fact, the rules of jiu-jitsu clearly say that I must go down and engage with my opponent who has sat to the floor. Because of this consideration, many jiu-jitsu players will come out and simply sit down to various forms of guard position. There's a bunch of reasons they might do that. It might be because they just want to save energy. Okay, most of the big point scores in jiu-jitsu come down on the ground, so why not just get straight down to the ground and work down there, save energy and get down to business. It might be for tactical reasons. You might believe that your opponent's far more advanced than you are in standing throwing skills, for example, in which case you want to prevent him from scoring on you by sitting down to the ground. For whatever reason the athletes decide to engage in it, sitting down to guard is one of the most common actions in all of the sport in the standing position. It's absolutely crucial, therefore, that we have an effective way of performing it ourselves, and later on in the video we'll look at effective ways to counter it. Now, if you look at the way guard pulling is traditionally done in the sport, you will see it has a kind of a slightly passive connotation associated with it. Typically what you'll find is that in the sport of jiu-jitsu, the one demand that's made is that the athletes must have some form of grip upon each other before they sit to guard. In submission grappling, I can just come out towards my training partner and just sit straight down. Okay, but in the IBJJF rules of jiu-jitsu, I must make some kind of contact before I can sit down. Now, the contact you have to make can be quite minimal. It can be any form of grip upon your opponent. A simple hand grip might be enough. Okay, a single sleeve is more than enough. And from here, once I establish contact, then I can sit down to the ground in any method that I choose. The idea is that once we sit to the floor, I go from a standing position down to the floor, and now the game begins. Okay, I've taken myself out of standing position. I've gone into to ground fighting, and from here we go to work. What if we took on a completely different philosophy of sitting to guard? What if, instead of saying, okay, here's the standing scenario, and let's get rid of that by pulling guard and go down and work on the ground and go to the ground scenario, what if we started our groundwork in the standing position? What if instead of pulling my opponent to guard, I pulled him directly to a sweep? Then you'd have a very different philosophy of pulling guard. It would no longer be a passive kind of action where you're saying, I don't really have any standing skills in comparison to my opponent, so I'm just going to take it to a completely different scenario and go down to the floor and see what happens down there. Rather, you would be saying, I am going to actively go out, get some kind of proactive grip upon my opponent, and directly from the standing position, pull him directly into a sweep. This would be a very aggressive, attacking, proactive form of pulling guard. I often refer to this as Not pulling guard, but pulling to a sweep, or the PTS version of guard pulling. And this, in my mind, is the finest form of guard pulling, because you are now changing guard pulling from a slightly defeatist, passive form of activity to a proactive form of attack, where you're attacking from the standing position by pulling guard. You're pulling your opponent directly into a form of sweep, which ironically will score exactly the same points as a successfully executed takedown. A successful sweep in the sport of jiu-jitsu scores 2 points, the same point score as a takedown scores. Now let's put this in a context. Let's say you came up against a highly skilled judo player, and you know damn well if you got into a throwing competition with him, you come out second best. He would score 2 points on you with a good clean throw. But what if you came out and you directly pulled into some kind of jiu-jitsu sweeping position, say X-guard or Ashigurami or any other of the sweep positions that we'll look at? Well, the chances of a judo opponent successfully resisting an X-guard sweep, which is not really a strong part of judo at all, is dramatically lower than would be his ability to stop you from scoring, say, a takedown. In this sense, you could go out in the standing position against someone who's much better at throwing than you and score the same amount of points, 2 points, as you would for a successful throw. And the chances of him resisting you would be massively less than if you went out and tried to throw the person. In this way, someone who's very good on the ground can take the fight to a better thrower from the standing position quickly down to the floor and directly into a sweep. And you're going to get the same points and the same top position that you would have got for a throw. This kind of PTS guard pulling directly to a sweep, not to guard as a passive position, but just directly from a standing position right into a strong sweeping position, is the kind of guard pulling that I want to get you guys interested in. I think if jiu-jitsu players took this kind of philosophy seriously and made it part of their standing curriculum, they would transform the notion of guard pulling from a passive, reactive way of fighting into a highly aggressive, proactive way of initiating the standing position, which would enable them to take on even people who are very skilled in the standing position and score that 2 points and get that top position much more readily than they are currently.